Hello, everybody. My name is Portia Sabin. I am the president of the Music Business Association. And welcome to the third installment of Evolution, Empowerment, and Earnings, Making Sense of the Modern Music Business, which is a three-part web series that Music Biz has presented in conjunction with the MLC. This is our third and final installment, but the first two installments, one that was broadcast in October with Serona Elton, and one that was broadcast earlier this month with Maurice Russell. Both of those installments are amazing. You should check them out. You can find them on our website, musicbiz.org. So a lot of people have already been going back and watching those again. Do feel free to do that. Serona in particular unpacks a lot of the nitty-gritty details of the way that royalties and rights flow in our industry in an incredible presentation, a one-pager that the MLC has put together that everybody should see. If you haven't seen it yet, you got to see it. If you've already seen it, you need to see it again. And that's a lot of fun. So check that out. For today, we have me in conversation with the CEO of the MLC, Kris Ahrend. I'm very excited to do that. Earlier in the day, Kris was pointing out that he did his very first interview with me back in 2021, the virtual version of Music Biz. So it's exciting to, I've been talking to Kris about this stuff for a long time, and I'm really excited to talk to him some more today. Just a couple of housekeeping things. Please introduce yourselves in the chat. It looks like Nicole has already put the link to the past recordings in the chat for the past two webinars, so please check those out. And also, if you have a question for me and for Kris, please use the Q&A feature at the bottom of the page. I think that will be the best way to make sure that you get your questions found, because otherwise, if it's in the chat, it gets jumbly and it's hard to hang on to that. So with no further ado, let me introduce my guest for today, CEO of the MLC, Kris Ahrend.
Hey, everybody.
Hey.
I think I popped in early, Portia.
Awesome. Why not? Join me. I would just like to point out that I'm like a cat in the sunspot right now. So I'm like feeling very purry. I like it. It's kind of amazing. Kris, our installment here today is the music industry's two promises to creators. And I think that you and I are uniquely suited to talking about this. You have worked in the music industry for a very long time, and so have I. And so I think it's, worth us unpacking these two promises to creators. So to get started with that, our first promise to creators in the industry is a commitment to cultivate them in their creative work. And I ran a record label for 13 years. I was an artist manager. I was an artist myself. You've been in the business forever. Right off the top of your head, what is your feeling about that commitment to cultivate artists' creative endeavors?
Well, it's certainly the one that I think attracts all of us to the business, because all of us at some point in our lives come into contact with creativity and the creative process. I often joke that all of us started out in elementary school as performers and instrumentalists because we all sang in the chorus and we all took recorder in elementary school music. And for many of us, that's where our creative experiences began and ended. But we got close enough to see the magic of music and to see that some people were gifted in ways that most of us weren't. And so that first promise to me is really about the desire that so many of us have in the business to get as close as possible to that magic, to that gift that only a handful of people have. And it's intoxicating, it's inspiring, it's exciting. It's all the things you read about and you see in the news. It's the music videos, or at least it's the perception that life as a creative is like the music videos. And so it's easy, right? We don't have to convince anybody to buy into that first promise. We all inherently want to be a part of it, I think. Does that resonate for you?
I absolutely agree. I mean, that's something that I find delightful about the music business to this day, is that it's really true. You know, no matter who you're talking to, from the junior person who just, came to work in the mailroom to people at the very tippy top, everybody feels that way about music. It's what inspired them to get into this business in the first place. And your trajectory actually was quite interesting, because you're a lawyer, and I mean, there are a lot of things that a lawyer could do with their career, but you moved into music. What can you tell us a little bit about that decision?
Sure. Well, the truth is, long before I was a lawyer, I was a musician. So, like so many people on today watching, I was a kid who started fiddling around with the piano when I was literally 5 years old, and I sang in the chorus and played in the band. And when I got older, I bought my first synthesizer back in the '80s when they were still new and exciting, and I played in bands in high school. And so I, like so many people, had this idea that maybe music was something I could be a part of. And I kept that going, right through college. I minored in theater, so I did a lot of creative stuff in college. And even in law school, I played in a band. I did a one-act play. I sang in the chorus. But obviously, by the time I made the choice to go to law school, I had come to grips with the reality that it was probably not my destiny to make a living being a creative, or to devote my life to being a creative. And I think that's important, right? There are lots of people who will say it never mattered if I was going to make money. This was the only thing I was going to be able to do. I wasn't one of those people. There were other things that I thought I might be destined to do. And so I started to pursue those. But what I discovered after getting out of school was that there was this whole other side of the business, the parts that aren't on stage and involving people that aren't behind the microphone. Quite frankly, it's all the different roles that music business does such a great job of highlighting, right? And celebrating, because just like a movie involves far more than the handful of people that are on screen, and music involves far more people than the handful of folks that are in the band. So when I realized that there were all these roles that I could potentially fill in the music business, and many of them were well suited to people who had gone to law school, I thought, well, this is a no-brainer. I gotta try to get in the door there, and that's what I did. So my choice to be a lawyer in the music business was very much driven by my desire to be involved with music, even though I recognized that I was not cut out to be a creative person.
And it's so funny, everybody's path is different, but I sort of got to the music business. I always say that I'm a music fan who became a music business fan, because when I was a drummer in a punk band in New York City in the 90s and early 2000s, I was the business one in the band. I was the person who booked the shows and, tried to figure out how we get our little J cards printed up for cassettes and all of that stuff. And I found myself being really drawn to the business side of it, and just being really interested in, what's the behind the scenes look like? So, we talk in music biz all the time about one of the exciting things about the music industry is, no matter what your passion is or what you're good at, let's say you're a really excellent accountant. We need those in the music industry. There's a path for pretty much everyone. If you love music, but you've got a different skill set, this is a great place for you.
Yep.
So, keep that in mind, people in the chat. This is a great place for all different folks from with all different skill sets. So, if we're talking about the promise to creators to support them in their creativity, I think we can't really overlook the fact that our industry has changed so much in even just the last 15 years. We had a huge sea change in the industry where, with the arrival of the streaming economy and the sort of sidelining, I won't say death of, I will say sidelining of the physical marketplace. But, when you and I got into the music industry, the way that artists were compensated was pretty straightforward. There were gatekeepers in the industry. It looked quite different. In order for an artist to truly work and be a creative, and what that creative support looked like was a record contract with an independent or with a major, money that was supplied by someone to either, help them create their recording, et cetera, videos, whatever, through their career, and then the distribution of that music into the marketplace by a company to record stores, and then the physical sales of records and CDs to the consumer. And then the payment of artists came from on the physical recording side, on the master recording side, from those sales. Publishing has always paid artists a slightly different way. But then with the revolution in our industry, what's the right word? The arrival of Spotify in America, let's say. And just, the sort of sea changes that we sort of underwent as an industry. One of the things that has changed is, how do we ensure that people get paid for their work? Because that is still critical. I mean, I think everyone who works in the industry, we've already established we love music, we love creators. We may ourselves not be able to just be creators fully, but the people who are need to get supported and they need to get compensated. So it's been really a challenge to make sure that those folks get compensated. And the MLC really is a very recent player in the industry, sort of bursting into the scene a couple of years ago. And do you want to talk a little bit about just what the MLC, what role you guys play in the ecosystem right now?
Sure, but I'd love to pick up on kind of the points you made before that, because I think it's really it informs the conversation that I think we will have. You're absolutely right to point to the significance of digital and of streaming, and the shift that created in the industry, and that shift represented a lot of different changes. The first one was simply access. When you and I were at the beginning of our adulthoods, and you were beginning to pursue music professionally, and I was coming to grips with the fact that I probably wasn't going to be a professional musician, the reality was, for either one of us, I had a tape, a cassette tape with some songs that my band had made. You had a cassette tape. Those cassette tapes didn't go anywhere other than the cassette player of our car, the Walkman we carried, or the stereo system that someone had if we handed them the tape. We didn't have the ability to get a record into a record store. You couldn't go to Tower Records and say, hey, would you carry this? So fundamentally, 99% of the creative people in the world had no access to the market. And therefore, the second promise to pay creators really was irrelevant, because there was nothing to pay you on. You weren't in the market. You were not acting in a professional capacity. You were aspiring, but there was no revenue, there was no commerce, there were no royalties. So for creators in the old business, because there were gatekeepers that had to let them in and say, okay, you can now make music as a professional, the handful of creators that got through those gates, and I'm not defending in any way the idea of a gatekeeper, but factually that's what happened. The handful of people that got through tended to go from making next to nothing to making substantial amounts of money, or at least being involved with substantial amounts of money. And they could then immediately assemble a team of people, a business manager, a creative manager, an accountant, a lawyer, and those people would help them manage their business from day one. As you also pointed out, the business was pretty straightforward. If your record royalties said you made $2 a record, and Billboard said you sold 1 million records, the math wasn't that hard, right? $2 million. And a lot of folks did that math on the back of a napkin, and that was how they tracked their income. And it was pretty straightforward. Now, there were lots of ways that bad things happened, and so I don't mean to suggest that there weren't people ripping off artists 20, 30 years ago, but that was happening despite the fact that the business was relatively straightforward. And again, there were only a handful of creators that had access to the professional market. Streaming changed all of that. Streaming opened up the global music market to every single person who has the desire to create. And that's one of the amazing things for me in my role at the MLC now. I will go and speak at college campuses to young people who aspire to be creatives. And 20 years ago, if I did that, we'd be talking about how you get through the gates. What are the steps you need to take to increase your chances? Now, when I talk to them afterward, 10 students will come up and say, hey, I've already got stuff on Spotify. They're already in the market. They're not aspiring. They're not hoping. They're not learning. They're in it. So because everybody can be in it, everybody can and is making some money. They're generating some revenue, but they don't have teams of people around them who know how it all works. And of course, how it all works has gotten much more complicated. So we are today in a world where access is easy, but the knowledge that you need to maintain your business isn't something that someone hands to you. You have to find it. You have to seek it out. And the good news, again, is we certainly try to share as much information we can with folks about how things work. But Music Biz fundamentally is dedicated to educating people in the business and people who want to get in the business about how the business works. So now we have millions of creatives who are learning on the job how this all works. And that, again, is great because they are empowered. They have the ability to earn a living, but they have to do things to understand how it works. And in the case of organizations like the MLC, they have to know, first of all, that we have money for them, and then they have to establish a financial connection to us so that we can send them money. And then they've got to do other things that we'll no doubt talk about that tell us about the works they've created. And if they don't do those things, money will not mysteriously find its way to your door. So it really is incumbent on everyone who has taken advantage of the access we now have to also understand the business and make the connections that they need in order to connect with the earnings that they are generating.
I want to go back. I feel like this is possibly controversial, but I'm just having this like moment of thinking about, you know, when things were as they used to be in the old regime of the music industry, the way that creatives were supported in being creative, right, had a lot to do with, you know, being paid for their work, but also a lot of times advances, you know, money to do the recording, sort of money for a lifestyle. And sometimes that support wasn't very empowering, if you know what I mean. I mean, you touched on it a little bit with, you know, of course, in the old days, bad things happened. Money was stolen from them by unscrupulous actors. But there's also an aspect of it where I think creatives were allowed to be creatives and just live in a fantasy world of, I'm in a garret with my flowing robe, and I don't need to think about that nasty business side. You know, there are people who are doing that for me. And then that becomes a trust situation where, are those people really trustworthy, whatever. And I think one of the biggest changes we have now is artists don't really have that luxury anymore. You know, we do our best. You guys do your best to educate. And I mean, all of us, you guys in particular, are going across the country all year, every year, just talking to artists and musicians and really trying to get them to understand the system. But at the end of the day, artists now in 2023 have got to advocate for themselves. They've got to be educated. They have to know that there's knowledge out there for them, and that knowledge equals money, right? Yeah. This is critical for whatever, you know, the patchwork of historical accidents that is the music business has led us here, and this is where we are, and this is what artists need to know today.
Yes, I think you're right, and I don't think it should be controversial, but I think in the pre-digital world, many creators didn't know the business, didn't feel they needed to know the business. They hired people to do that for them, and they trusted them. And you know, there were many good representatives who served them incredibly well, but more than a handful who didn't. And I think what that fundamentally reveals is the importance of understanding, right? Empowerment is having the knowledge you need to accomplish your goals and secure an outcome that you want. And if you don't understand how the business works, it's much more difficult for you to ultimately secure the future that you want in the business. And so I do think, for a lot of artists in the old business, they trusted other people. They didn't really understand how it worked. And at some point, eventually, that lack of knowledge, that lack of engagement on the business side had a consequence. And that consequence wasn't a positive one. Today, because everyone has access, but most people don't have the means to assemble a team of 4 or 5 people, they're left to themselves to do it. But I think that's the opportunity. Just like access is an opportunity that didn't exist for us when we were young, the opportunity to understand how the business works and to engage directly with the organizations that pay you, that opportunity for empowerment is also something new that exists. And so I think for all creators, the question is, are you going to take advantage of that? And I firmly and passionately believe that if you are talented enough to be a creator, you are more than smart enough to understand the business. It will not be as easy as creating. And that's, I think, where, as creative people, we have to recognize, right? And not that I put myself in the category with any professional musician, but I can sit down at the piano and I can play music and it sounds pretty and I don't have to think about it, right? There's something inherent in the way I'm wired that allows me to do that. Understanding the music business doesn't work that way for most people. So you have to work at it. You have to develop a different set of muscles, a different set of skills, but it is entirely possible. And I think it is imperative that all creators embrace that opportunity. I often use as an example the movie The Social Network about Mark Zuckerberg. Mark Zuckerberg was this creative computer programmer in college who aspired to create a website and build a business. And when you watch the movie, which is admittedly a fictionalized version of it, but I think this part is accurate, there was never a point where Mark Zuckerberg thought, oh, I can't own the business. I can't run the business. I have to find other smarter people that can do that for me. He was creating it. He was coding it. He was building it, and he was going to run it. That's the mindset we need all creators to have. I'm going to be the creative person, and I'm going to be the person who leads the business. That doesn't mean that as you become more successful, you do all the jobs, right? Like any company, yours or mine, there are lots of roles, and each of us can only fill one role. But you, as the leader of your business, your small business, you should know what the jobs are, what the jobs entail, and have enough of an understanding to be able to judge whether the person you've hired to fill that role eventually is doing it well or not. And I think that's the shift that we are starting to see and we need to see more of. We want creators who understand the business enough to be empowered to either do for themselves what they need to do to get paid, or to hire good people to do the things they need to do to help them get paid. But it all starts with that knowledge that empowers you. And I think that's the exciting part of the business today.
And it's funny, I think, Kris, because I feel like where I've been thinking about this for the last 20 years, there's like a strange cultural disconnect, right? Because art is supposed to be pure. Art is supposed to be, you're supposed to make art because you can't not make art. You're supposed to make it because it comes from your soul. And then commerce is supposed to be this sort of like dirty thing, right? Where you're like, oh, if I'm an artist, I can't think about making money off my art, or else it's not true. It's not authentic. I feel like that has really started to change in the last few years, big time. I think people are starting to understand, that they can make money from any creative endeavor that they undertake. And then in fact, if they find that they have a talent in a specific direction and they want to do that full time, I mean, listen, I say that I've said this for 25 years. If you just want to be in a band with your friends and play once a month down at your local corner bar, God be with you. That's fabulous. But, you are a hobby band. That is a hobby band. Like, that's great. Have a great time. Or you want to just sing in your local choir. That's fantastic. But people who are like, no, I want to do this for a living. This is my actual job. The minute you say this is my actual job, you have to treat it like it's an actual job, which means you have to make money doing it. And, yes. And this is a unique moment in history because you can actually make money. There are sources of income out there.
Yes. And there are great examples, right? I mean, the other night there was something on one of the news shows about Beyonce and Jay-Z, and they're great examples, right? They've been extraordinarily successful in a host of ways that go well beyond the sort of first thing they did creatively, and they own what they do, right? And they are in charge. And I think, you know, what is great about Beyonce in particular is she celebrates the fact that she's in charge, right? And that is the model. Taylor Swift is another example, right? She's built an extraordinarily successful business, and she's at the top of it. And there's no doubt that she's at the top of it, that she's driving the key decisions that are made. Now, there are hundreds, if not thousands of people that support that business, but she is front and center, the leader of it. So I think those examples are two. There are many more, but I think more and more that's the model that we want to celebrate, of creators who recognize that their creativity is the foundation of a business that they can build for themselves, but that it can be their business. And then the question is, who are your partners? Who do you want to partner with, right? And our business is a business that depends on partnership at every level. You know, we still have extraordinarily wonderful partners in the form of record companies and publishing companies that can do amazing things to help cultivate the creativity of a talented person and help spread that around the world in a moment. There are obviously tons of different companies that provide services to artists. You as an artist get to decide how you want to configure your business. And that's something we talk about a lot at the MLC. We pay a set of royalties that go to songwriters or the partners they have chosen. And we emphasize to songwriters, you can do this all yourself if you choose, or you can choose a partner. And there is no right answer. You simply have to decide how you want to set up your business. For many people, they will say, look, I don't like that. I don't think it's my strength. I understand it now, but I'm going to hire somebody to do that for me, an administrator or a business manager. And that's great, right? Smart business people decide where they want to spend their time in their business, and then they hire good people to do the other things that need to be done. Other people will say, look, I want a publisher and I want to have them managing all parts of that for me. Great choice. So again, whether it's a publisher, an administrator, a society overseas, or a business manager, accountant, lawyer, there's so many different ways you can solve for the connection you need with an organization like the MLC, but you have to make that decision. And if you don't make the decision, right, then you won't get connected to the money. So the only bad decision here is to make no decision and to simply not engage, because then you're guaranteed to not get the earnings that you've generated. Any of those other choices, you'll get the money. And the question is, you know, through whom, how, and how much are you paying them? But that's your choice.
Yeah, while you were saying that, I was thinking there's no right answer, but there's definitely a wrong answer. And the wrong answer is do nothing. And it's funny because that's also changed. I really feel like I used to hear 20 years ago about, oh, you know, people love having, you know, the big labels, the big companies love having a black box because that's more money for them. And I feel like things have totally, I mean, 180 changed, if that was ever true, which probably it wasn't. But it's, you know, we desperately want people to collect their money. It's your mandate to pay out the monies that you guys collect on behalf of songwriters and publishers. I mean, it's absolutely critical to your mission that this gets done. And it really is, it's not a good look for anybody to have money that is unclaimed.
No, no. And I do think that is changing. For us, it's a legal requirement. We can't do anything with any unmatched, unpaid royalties other than eventually distribute those to other creators. So there's no interest for the MLC. There's no interest for any of us personally as executives. That money can only go one place, and that's out to creatives. And in that respect, you know, we have made it a priority to illuminate the black box in our part of the business. Our matching tool, which is one of the tools we make available to any of our members, allows any member of the MLC to search all of the data for any unmatched sound recording uses that we have not been able to connect to a song in our database. So to the extent we have not paid out royalties, the information we've gotten from the streaming services or the download services for those uses is available to be searched anytime for free in that matching tool. And if you find something that relates to one of your songs, you can propose the match in the tool. We'll review that within a month or so, and then we'll start paying you royalties once we verify that match is accurate. We've had members submit more than 1 million matches, not just of individual uses, but groups of uses where the data for the product, the sound recording product, was the same across 10 DSPs. And they said, hey, that group of uses all relates to my song, and here it is in your catalog, MLC. We've made that connection more than 1 million times. A great example of empowerment, right? The tool is there, the visibility is there. We're trying our best to make those connections, but you can also take advantage of that tool to look for yourself for the things that are yours, and then propose that connection and get paid. So for us, it's a mandate, both from a legal perspective and a strategic perspective. But I also think we're seeing that shift across organizations that don't have the mandate. And you're absolutely right. Organizations want money to flow through to the right person. They want to compete on how well they spread the music, not by withholding money or hoping that money doesn't get through the system. That's a losing business in any business, but it's increasingly a losing business in our business because the desire for and the requirement of transparency is growing in every part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Another thing I really love about the MLC when we were talking about helping folks is the fact that you guys have a phone number, and when artists call the phone number, someone answers that is a human person. I find that just delightful.
It's such a comment on, I guess, our world today, but that was a really important thing for us, Portia, from the very beginning. The earliest days, I pitched the idea to our board that we would lead by creating a really effective support team that would be accessible. And I'm proud to say that support team today has fielded about 65,000 inquiries and had one-on-one interaction 65,000 times. Probably not 65,000 unique people, because some of those people have called more than once, and we love that. We want you to call. But we track the metrics around that. We track how long it takes to answer the phone. Between 80 and 90% of the time, we answer the phone within 20 seconds. I dare say that there are a lot of much larger companies in other industries that we deal with every day that would be hard-pressed to match that response time when you call their 1-800 number. And all of that is because we want our members or our prospective members to understand how it works. We want to be able to answer their questions. Empowered members are ultimately going to be successful members. So the way we help empower you is by being available to you to answer your questions and to share as much of the information that we can with you on a one-on-one basis.
So Kris, I think the last 2 webinars in this series did a really great job of explaining the nitty-gritty, like these are the rights that are created when you write a song. These are the rights that are created when you record a song. Just on the off chance that there's anyone in our audience who wasn't on those past 2 webinars, can you just quickly talk about what royalties the MLC collects, just in the most basic terms?
We collect mechanical royalties from digital interactive streaming services and a handful of download services. An interactive streaming service is a streaming service where you get to choose the music you want to listen to, like Spotify, Apple, Tidal, Amazon, where again, if I want to listen to Portia, your band's tracks over and over again all day, every day, I can do that. And if I want to listen to a different song every day, I can do that. So anything where you have the choice of what to listen to, that's what interactive means. Mechanical royalties are one of the royalties that are owed to songwriters and often paid through their partners, publishers, or administrators to them. A similar or a different right, but that sits alongside of the mechanical, is the performance right. That's the right that our friends at ASCAP, BMI, CSAC, and GMR administer. So performance royalties are a second set of royalties that songwriters are entitled to if you count mechanicals first. So that's what we do. And I did put it in the chat before, and I think I can paste it again. The link to that chart that Serona covered in her webinar, the digital royalties landscape, that shows you visually the 2 sets of publishing rights that you have for digital audio and the 2 royalty streams. And it also shows the corresponding rights on the sound recording side. So that is a great slide for anyone on the call to open up, print out, and save, and just look at to understand, at least in the context of digital audio, the 4 ways potentially you might be entitled to get paid if you're a creator.
Exactly. It's an amazing chart. You guys did such a great job with that. And everybody should have it on their wall if they're an artist.
Blow up
So,
signs.
so you guys collect royalties and you pay them out to publishers, administrators, and self-published musicians, correct? Artists who are self-published.
Yes, we often refer to them as self-administered writers, because it is the administration that generally describes the collection of money, whereas publishing typically refers to all the work that publishers do to support that first promise, the creative part, in addition to the administration, which is collecting the money. But you can use either term, self-administered or self-published. And that's an important distinction, unlike performing royalties, where performing royalties get divided into a writer share and a publisher share. And so even if you're a writer and you've signed a publishing deal and that publisher represents all of your songs, you still are entitled to collect your writer share performance royalties directly from a PRO. On the mechanical side, it does not work that way. We don't divide royalties into 2 shares. So if you have a publisher, they will collect all your mechanicals from us, and then they will pay you whatever percentage of those mechanicals you're entitled to receive under your publishing deal with them. But if you don't have a publisher, then we'll pay all the money to you, and you effectively act as your own publisher, and then you don't have to worry about 2 pieces, writer piece and a publisher piece. You just get all the money. So that's why self-administered writers need that connection with us. If you have a publisher or an administrator, you've effectively asked them to represent you and to establish that connection with the MLC on your behalf. But what do we know, Portia, about so many writers? The answer to the question, are you self-administered, is not binary. There are many writers, including many incredibly successful writers at the highest levels, who have had publishing deals, but still have a handful of songs that they never gave to a publisher to administer, and they administer those themselves. So you can be both self-administered for some songs and published or administered for other songs. And as long as you have one song that you self-administer, you can and should become a member of the MLC so that we can pay you your royalties for that one song. And then all your other royalties can go through your publisher. But that one song, you can connect with us. So for every writer, we really emphasize understand your catalog and understand how you have set up the business of each of the songs in your catalog. And to the extent that you have kept the administration rights for any of your songs, you should become a member of the MLC in order to collect the royalties for those songs, or you should assign them to a publisher to make sure that someone else is doing that for you.
I honestly think it should be a masterclass. I saw a songwriter do, and I can't remember, you'll probably remember exactly who this was and where this was. It was probably at Music Biz, and I was, 30% present. But this person talked about how when the MLC came online a couple of years ago, he did a full deep dive into his catalog from top to bottom, 25 years worth of songs. And after doing that, increased his earnings yearly by something like 60% just by finding songs that had not been properly put into the system.
Yep. Well, look, that goes back to what we were talking about at the beginning of the conversation today. In a pre-digital world, the only songs that made money were the songs on records that were in the store. And what do we know about record stores? Even the biggest record stores in the world only had limited capacity for inventory. So there were only so many records, physical records, that any store could fit in their store or in the shelves behind the scenes. And that meant that for most songwriters, their songs had a lifespan. The record would get released, it would be out for a couple of years, it would earn a bunch of money, and then that record would get cut out. And once it was cut out, you basically closed up that part of your business unless you were lucky enough to do a sync deal. And so looking back over 25 years, what shifted is then when we moved to a streaming world where suddenly it was really digital first, downloads too, we have unlimited inventory because all of it's just server space. So now the digital services can offer every sound recording that was ever made of every song that was ever written. So over the course of a 25-year career, if you wrote 400 songs, there is probably at least one recording of every one of those songs available on Spotify. And every one of those could get streamed in any given month, which means the data, the information for all 400 of your songs has to be right in order to get paid. In the old business, it didn't matter, because once it was cut out, you just moved on to the next one and you tried to get that next cut on the next album that came out. So yeah, for a lot of established writers, we've heard things like that, where they look for the first time in our public database, the public search, it's free, and they see, oh, I've got 400 songs, but their songs aren't all fully claimed, and maybe their shares are fine, but a co-writer didn't claim their share. Maybe they didn't claim a share and a co-writer did, but they can see very clearly the shape of the data for each song, and multiplied across 400, that's a lot of information that may be missing. Now, that's the challenging time we're in right now, is that all of us at every level are trying to catch up, and we're trying to fill all those holes from 40 years of not really worrying about the details, because in most instances the record came and went so quickly that you didn't really have to worry about it. Now everything is important, but we have given our members a set of tools that they can use to get their data in much better shape, and that should ensure that they get paid all the royalties that they're owed from us. And then they can export all that data real time with the press of a button into an Excel file to give to anyone else they deal with. So our hope is the time you spend getting your data in order with us will not only lead to a 50 or 60% increase in your earnings on the mechanical side, but you can then give that data to your PRO and make sure they've got it all. You can give it to an ex-US administrator and make sure they're getting it all. And that's what we want. We want all the data to be out there for everyone to use for the purpose of fulfilling that second promise to you, which is making sure you get paid properly.
And do you guys pay, I honestly don't remember the answer to this question. Do you guys pay retroactively? Like if someone went online today, became a member of the MLC, searched their catalog and discovered, oh, I haven't been collecting on this song for, ever.
Yeah.
How far back do you guys pay?
We go back now as far as 2007. The historical royalties that the DSPs have the option to transfer to us date back that far. And so provided the other rights holders on those songs claimed the right share, your share, if it was handed over to us, is still here waiting for you. So yes, as an added incentive, getting your data in order today will not only ensure that you get paid properly going forward, but it could help you unlock royalties that had been held by those services for many years that they've now given to us. And again, in our hands, the only thing we can ever do with them is pay them out. So they're not lost. They're waiting for you to find them, and we're trying to find them for you as well. So that's an added bonus.
So let's quickly discuss sort of the high level points we've made here today. Number one, for best practices for all artists, educate yourself. Find out as much about this business as you possibly can. This one sheet that Kris has dropped into the chat a couple of times is really unbelievably helpful for that. And number two, take this business seriously as a business and advocate for yourself and collect your money.
Yes. And we can break that down. Another suggestion that we make a lot, as a creator, know your number. Know the number of creative works that you have put in the market. So if you're a songwriter, you should know at any given time the number of songs you have written that have been recorded and released at least once, because that's the number of things, the number of small businesses that you've got to make sure you're managing effectively, or someone else is for you. If you don't know how many songs are in the market, how can you possibly know whether you're getting paid properly for all those songs? So knowing your number, and it goes, for an artist on the sound recording side, the same thing. It's great that you can make something, on your home computer or your iPad tonight and have it up on, Spotify by the weekend, but don't do that with such randomness that you don't actually know what you put up there. Keep track. Don't pick a different distributor for every track you put up. Pick one, and if you decide you want to leave them, then take all your stuff and go to another one. Sometimes we talk to creators and like, well, this track was through that distributor and this one with another one. It's like, you're making this unnecessarily complicated. Pick a company, run all your stuff through them, but know how many sound recordings you put in the market. That's the first step to getting paid, is just knowing your number. And then from there, and we've seen a little bit of this in the chat and the comments, know those key identifiers that we all use, like social security numbers, to identify you and your works. So, for you as a creator on the writing side, you will have an IPI number. And to the extent that you create a publishing entity or just a name for your publishing business, that business will have its own IPI. It's just a fancy way of saying a music-specific social security number. Know your identifiers for your songs. Those are ISWCs. And your identifier for sound recordings, that's ISRC. Again, Juan, you put some of those in the chat in your question. And then make sure that all the things you create get those identifiers. They are not an ironclad way to ensure you get paid on everything, but they're a great start. And that's really the key, right? We now have data for more than 33 million songs in our database. We know that the digital services claim to have well over 100 million unique sound recordings on their services. And we at the MLC know that we have data for more than 900 million unique products. So if you think about that unique recording, every service that releases it or makes it available creates its own product. Spotify's version of your song, that's a product. Amazon's version, that's a product. Apple's titles, they're each products. There are more than 900 million of them. You need to have a handle on your data, and you need to make sure that the organizations that pay you have as much information as possible about the songs you've written and the sound recordings that feature those songs, because we're trying to make those connections between 33 million songs and hundreds of millions of products every month. And the less information we have, the harder it is to make those connections. The more information we have, the easier it is, and the more likely it is that we will make those connections properly. So don't ever forget, as special as your songs are, they are still going into a market now that is measured in tens, if not hundreds of millions of things. And that's a lot.
That is a lot. There's a question in the Q&A that says, am I correct in understanding that the MLC operates on behalf of US artists only? I thought that's a good question for you.
I have a great question. So the MLC only collects these mechanical royalties for uses of songs that take place on the US versions of these services. However, we all know that in a digital market with infinite inventory space, the songs that are available to any of us on the US version of Spotify or Apple or Tidal or Amazon can originate from anywhere in the world, right? Because there are phenomenally talented songwriters and performing artists who are making music all over the world, and they want that music available in the US market. So we pay royalties out to creators in well over 120 countries around the world. So the royalties only relate to streams or downloads that take place on the US versions of these services, but the money can be paid out to creators anywhere in the world. And therefore, creators everywhere in the world need to have that connection with the MLC, either directly as a member or through a publisher, an administrator, or society, or some other representative.
Yeah, and it's so funny because as soon as you start answering that question, the world starts opening up neighboring rights. I mean, just the thing about the music industry is it's unbelievably complicated, and it really takes a long time to learn about it, which is honestly why people like me get really frustrated when artists and people from the outside treat us like we're idiots, right? We're not idiots. This is a complicated business. It's extremely complicated. And once you get into publishing, I mean, forget about it. All bets are off. As soon as I heard about splits, I was like, I'm out. I'll stay on the master recording side.
And I think in many respects, we are a victim of our success, because music, right, we have celebrated for decades this idea that the people that ultimately make the music we listen to, again, are so talented, and what they do is like magic. And so we make it seem like it's easy and intuitive, when in reality the business is quite complicated. It's interesting, compare that to the movie business, where nobody pretends that making a blockbuster movie or even a documentary film is easy, right? We all know that there are hundreds, if not thousands, of people involved in making that movie, and it's really hard. So again, for whatever reason, music has sort of built this myth that it's easy and magic, when in reality it's quite complicated and it's quite hard. And we would do well to, I think, let people see how hard and complicated it is, because it would probably change the perception that people have outside of our business about what we do. And that's why I go back to creators again. I think for creators, it's an extraordinarily exciting time, but make no mistake, your job is so difficult because one, you have to be able to do that thing that all of us wish we could do, but that only a few people can actually do in a way that resonates, right? That's the creative piece. But then on top of that, if you want to do this as more than just a hobby, you've got to understand how this very complicated business works. And that's hard. So again, music is hard, the business is hard. But I do think there are lots of companies out there that are trying to meet you where you are, much more than in the past, and they want to help you understand. And I would put the MLC at the front of that list. We want to meet you where you are. We want to help you figure this out. We want to help make you successful. And if we can do that for you, and you can replicate that in all the other parts of the business, then you have a real opportunity to make a living doing this thing that you love and that we love when you do.
Absolutely. I think I figured out what we needed to do, though, back in the original era of radio in order to make our business appear as complicated as it really is, which is after every song is played, someone just reads the liner notes from beginning to end.
Right. Ironically, right? The movies do that, and they license 2 or 3 songs to play because it takes so long to go through all the names. But you're right, music, we have not done that as well. Though I do think that's what's great about the resurgence in vinyl. I'm sure any of you that are vinyl fans or that grew up with vinyl like you and I did, Portia, what was great about a vinyl record was you had all the space. So you could read the liner notes, and so many people were credited. And so you do get a sense of just the scope of people involved in making a single song that you love. And then you multiply that again by 100+ million. That's a lot of people who have spent a lot of time to help deliver that piece of magic to you and to your earbuds so that you can have 3 or 4 minutes of magic.
Absolutely. There's only one other question in the Q&A that I wanted to just sort of touch on, and really it's more big to show the complexity as we've been talking about it, and also just to point of what the MLC actually does. So in the chat we have, can you explain how the per stream rate is determined? So I think it's really important that people understand that we're not talking about a per stream rate when we're talking about what the MLC collects, because you guys are collecting a publishing royalty, and that is determined in a totally different way, correct?
Yes, but the way that the royalties that we administer work is there are a set of formulas devised by a group of judges in Washington, D.C., and those formulas are used to calculate the total amount of royalties or the total pool of royalties that a digital service owes in a given month for all of the streams that took place on their service during that month. And in fact, those formulas are tailored to each type of service offering. So there is a different pool of royalties for Spotify's ad-supported service than the subscriber service, the subscription service. So at the end of the day, there are like almost a dozen formulas for all the different types of service offerings. And each service has to deliver to the MLC the data we need to calculate the pool of royalties for all the streams that took place in a month on each of those services. What we then do is we divide that pool up or allocate it among all of the streams that were reported. And in doing so, we calculate an effective per play rate. So we take that pool, we divide it equally or pro rata on a stream by stream basis across all the songs that were streamed, and then we try to pay those royalties. That per stream rate is something that we show you in our royalties module. There's a rate sheet tab that you can click on and then download a copy of the rate sheet showing all of the sort of calculation steps that we use to calculate that per stream amount. So if you're curious, you can see that. But again, that process, the rate process, is pretty complicated. It's set by a group of judges in Washington. It's not today something that rights holders negotiate. So the real key for you as a rights holder is making sure that you give organizations like the MLC the data that we need to make the connections between the songs or the streams of songs that are reported to us and you, right? We do the math every month, and I can tell you exactly how much for a given month in a given service offering, how much per stream you should be getting. But what I can't tell is if the song that was streamed in a given instance was one that you wrote. So that's the piece that really matters. And then the per stream piece, again, is just ultimately how we arrive at the math of the royalties that you get in any given month on any given service for any one of your songs.
So there is a per stream rate, but it changes monthly and then it changes across those different offerings.
We calculate a per stream rate. It's not that the services have to pay X amount per stream. They have to pay a pool of money for all the streams, and then we calculate a per stream amount.
That's very helpful to understand. That's really, but that's what I'm talking about. This is complicated, very complicated.
Yes. And I just saw one in the chat, and so every month we get the data from every one of the DSPs that operates under this license we administer. It's called a blanket license. We get a report showing every sound recording and every stream. So we already have all that information, and the law says any stream of more than 30 seconds counts. So any stream of more than 30 seconds, we get the data. So that's all built into the process, and it's defined by, again, law and regulations. So once we get all that, then the question is, how do we connect a piece of that money to you? And that's where you come in. Becoming a member is so important, and then playing your part, helping us know what only you can know, which is, what song did you write? I can't know that unless you tell me that you did it. Even if I read in the press, like, oh, this is a great song, like newspapers get it wrong, websites aren't accurate. I can't trust that that website got it right, that Portia wrote the song. I need Portia to tell me that's my song, I wrote it. And I'm entitled to 50% of the royalties. And that's effectively what you're doing when you register a song with us. You're claiming your share of the revenue, the royalties for that song, so that we can pay you that amount of money.
And the way to do that is to go to themlc.com, right?
That's right. I'll quickly type that in as well in the chat, but you can initiate the membership process from our website. You can find the different ways to contact our support team on our website. You can find that graphic on the 4 ways to get paid on our website, a host of other information. We've got one sheets and other information translated into Spanish and French, if you prefer that. Our support team can field questions in dozens of languages, thanks to a third party that we engage to hop on the line with us if you decide you want to speak a different language. So yeah, we will meet you where you are, and our website is a great place to have that first meeting. And Juan, thanks so much. The transparency is the key to all of this, and it's something that we certainly strive to do better every day.
Fantastic. Well, that wraps up our fabulous 3-part series. I'm really appreciative. And my guest today was the lovely CEO of the MLC, Kris Ahrend. Thanks so much for being with me. And thanks to all of you guys for coming out and joining us. Go to themlc.com to find out more and join if you need to become a member. You will know if you need to become a member. And everybody have a fantastic afternoon. Thanks.